The shuttle hit the mountainside at an angle that should have killed us both. Came to with my face pressed against the cracked viewport, watching my own blood drip onto the console below. The emergency lights bathed everything in that sickly red glow they always used, like the designers wanted survivors to feel like they were already in hell. My left arm was pinned under a support beam, and when I tried to move it, the pain told me exactly what I needed to know about the state of my bones. Human. Human, you are leaking. The voice came from somewhere behind me. Thin, reedy. With that particular cadence the Velorii used when they were trying to sound calm but failing miserably. I turned my head, which cost me more than I'd like to admit. The diplomatic attaché, Counselor Yireth, I remembered now, was suspended upside down in her crash harness, her silver blue skin catching the red light in ways that made her look like a bleeding sunset. Her 4 eyes blinked at me in sequence, the way they did when they were processing something disturbing. Yeah, I managed. That happens when metal goes through flesh. This is concerning. The briefing materials indicated humans were more durable. I laughed and immediately regretted it. Lady, I don't know what briefing materials you read, but we break just fine. Getting my arm free took 10 minutes and most of my remaining will to live. Yireth watched the entire process with an expression I couldn't read. Though after 15 years of fighting alongside or against a dozen alien species, I'd learned that can't read usually meant doesn't want to. She was small for a Velorii, barely reaching my chest and young enough that her cranial ridges hadn't fully calcified yet. A junior diplomat probably, sent on what should have been a routine transport. Should have been. Can you release your harness? I asked, already knowing the answer. The mechanism appears damaged. Can you reach the manual release? All 4 of her arms stretched toward the buckle in a display that would have been impressive if any of them had been long enough. She was built for delicate work, the Velorii diplomatic cast always was, with fingers like elongated spider legs and joints that bent in ways that made human engineers weep with envy. But reach? That wasn't their strong suit. I cannot. I limped over every step of negotiation with my own body and cut her down with my survival knife. She fell into my arms with a sound of surprise, a high-pitched whistle that probably meant something rude in her language, and I set her down as gently as my broken arm would allow. Thank you, Sergeant Cole. Just Cole. The briefing materials indicated, the briefing materials can go to hell. I moved to the supply locker, or what was left of it. We need to take stock. Water, food, medical supplies, communication equipment. In that order. Yireth stood where I'd left her, all 4 arms wrapped around herself in what I recognized as a self-comfort gesture. Her secondary eyes, the smaller pair, were fixed on the viewport, on the alien landscape beyond it. Purple vegetation, 2 tall mountains, 3 moons hanging in a green-tinged sky. I do not recognize this world, she said quietly. Me neither. I pulled out a dented medkit and started working on my arm with my teeth and my one good hand. Which means the distress beacon is our only shot. The communication array was in the forward section. I noticed. The forward section was currently about 200 meters down the mountain, scattered in pieces across an increasingly steep slope. I'd see part of it from here. The main dish twisted into abstract art by the impact. Then we are in trouble? Yeah. I finished the splint, tested it, and accepted that it would have to do. But not dead yet. That counts for something. Yireth was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its diplomatic polish. Sergeant Cole, I must inform you that Velorii physiology requires sleep cycles of 12 to 14 standard hours. I will be significantly less functional than you for extended periods. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since we'd crashed. She was trying to stand straight, trying to project the competence her training demanded, but I could see the tremor in her lower arms, the way her eyes kept darting to the damaged hull like she expected it to collapse on us at any moment. She was scared, and she was telling me about her sleep schedule because she thought I needed to know she'd be a burden. Humans need less, I said, keeping my voice neutral. 4 to 6 hours in a pinch. I'll keep watch. That is generous. That's survival. I handed her a water pouch and a ration bar. Eat. Sleep when you need to. We'll figure the rest out in the morning. She took the supplies with 2 hands, her other 2 still wrapped protectively around her torso. The briefing materials did not mention that humans were generous, like I said. I turned back to the supply inventory, not wanting to see whatever emotion was crossing her face. The briefing materials can go to hell. The first night, she slept for 16 hours. I spent it cataloging our supplies, reinforcing the hull breach with emergency sealant, and watching the 3 moons trace their slow paths across the sky. The planet had a long night cycle, maybe 20 standard hours, which meant I had time to think, time I didn't particularly want. The mission had been simple. Escort a Velorii diplomatic team from Outpost 7 to the peace conference on Meridian Station. The war with the Kreth collective had been grinding on for 8 years, and the Velorii were the only neutral party both sides respected enough to mediate. I'd been assigned as security detail because I had experience with Velorii customs, because I spoke passable Velorian, and because my commanding officer had run out of other ways to punish me for telling a general exactly where he could shove his tactical assessment. Simple mission. Routine transport, 3 days of babysitting diplomats. Then the Kreth raiders had appeared out of nowhere. Our engines had taken a direct hit, and our pilot had performed what he'd optimistically called an emergency landing before the cockpit separated from the rest of the shuttle and took him with it. I found Yireth watching me when dawn finally came. A slow affair, the sun rising orange through the purple foliage. You did not sleep. I slept. 4 hours broken into 30-minute chunks whenever the local wildlife got too quiet. Enough. The briefing materials. If you mention those one more time, I'm going to assume you wrote them. Something flickered across her face. Embarrassment, maybe. I assisted in their compilation. For the diplomatic corps' cultural sensitivity training. I stared at her. You wrote the briefing materials. I contributed to them. So when they said humans were emotionally volatile but strategically predictable, that was you. That was the consensus of several, when they said we lack the sophisticated social structures of more advanced species? Her silver-blue skin darkened slightly, the Velorii version of a blush. Context is important in academic. When they said we form shallow temporary bonds focused primarily on reproductive advantages. That was a simplification of the research on, I held up my good hand. Counselor Yireth. I'm going to give you some real cultural sensitivity training. Free of charge. Ready? She nodded, all 4 eyes fixed on me with the intensity of someone who just realized they might have made a significant error. Humans don't need much sleep. We don't need much food. We don't need much water. I started packing supplies into the 2 functional backpacks I'd salvaged. We're not the fastest or the strongest or the smartest. What we are is stubborn. We get knocked down, we get back up. We lose a limb, we build a new one. We lose a friend. I stopped, my hands pausing over a med pack. We remember them. And we keep going. The shuttle was quiet except for the distant sounds of alien birds. What we don't do, I continued, keeping my voice even, is leave people behind. Even people who think we're shallow and predictable, and emotionally volatile. So here's how this is going to work. We walk north until we find water. We follow the water until we find civilization. You sleep when you need to, eat when you can, and keep moving when you're awake. I'll handle the rest. Why? The question caught me off guard. Why what? Why would you do this? I'm not your ally. The Velorii Consortium has maintained strict neutrality throughout the war. We have no treaty obligations, no military alliance. If I die here, it creates no political advantage for your species. I shouldered my pack and looked at her. This small, young, frightened diplomat who had probably never been more than a day's travel from a climate-controlled habitat in her life. Lady, I said, I've been fighting wars for 15 years. I've watched friends die in more ways than I want to count. The Kreth killed my squad on Hesperus IV, and the only reason I'm still breathing is because a Velorii medical ship picked up my escape pod. Her eyes widened. You were Sergeant First Class Marcus Cole, 47th Tactical Response Unit. Sole survivor. 6 weeks in a Velorii hospital while they put me back together with medical tech that shouldn't have been wasted on an enemy combatant. I met her gaze. You want to know why I'm going to get you home? Because someone on your side showed me kindness when they had no reason to. And I don't forget that. Yireth was quiet for a long moment. Then very slowly, she extended one of her upper hands toward me. The Velorii gesture of conditional trust. I will revise the briefing materials, she said quietly. I didn't take her hand. That would have implied a deeper commitment than either of us was ready for. But I nodded. Start with the part about shallow bonds. On the 4th night, the Kreth found us. We'd made good progress, almost 40 kilometers through terrain that ranged from difficult to nearly impassable, following a river that Yireth's botanical knowledge suggested led toward lower ground. She'd proven more useful than I'd expected. The Velorii diplomatic corps apparently included extensive wilderness training, and she could identify edible plants with a glance. She'd also stopped mentioning the briefing materials entirely. The sleep differential had become our rhythm. She'd rest for 12 hours, I'd keep watch. I'd catch 4 hours while she gathered food and purified water. It wasn't efficient, but it worked, and somewhere along the way it had become almost comfortable. "You dream," she said on the third night, while I was supposed to be sleeping. Violently, "Sorry if I woke you. You speak names." "Harrington." "Zhao." Someone called Tiny, who I assume was not small. I kept my eyes closed. 2 meters tall. Could bench press a combat shuttle. Did they Hesperus the fort? Yeah. I turned over, facing away from her. "Get some sleep, counselor." "Yireth." "What? My name?" "You have not used it, not once since the crash." She was right. I'd been keeping her at a distance, the way I'd learned to keep everyone at a distance. Names made things real. Names made things hurt. "Get some sleep, Yireth." I heard her settle back into her sleep role, but I could feel her watching me for a long time before she finally closed her eyes. On the 4th night I smelled the Kreth before I saw them. That particular scent, burnt ozone and something organic, like rotting vegetation, was seared into my memory from a dozen battlefields. I had my sidearm out before I was fully conscious, my hand clamped over Yireth's mouth to stop her instinctive question. Her eyes went wide, but she understood. She nodded once and I released her. 3 of them I breathed. Maybe 4. 100 meters east. Scouts, probably tracking the shuttle's crash trajectory. I was already calculating odds, and they weren't good. 1 wounded soldier with a sidearm against a Kreth scouting party. They'll have backup. Extraction team within a few hours. Then we run. I run. You go west, find cover, wait until dawn. I am not leaving you. Yireth, I am not leaving you. Her voice was quiet but certain, and all 4 of her eyes held mine with an intensity I hadn't seen before. You said humans don't leave people behind. Neither do Velorii, not the ones who matter. Something cracked in my chest, something that had been frozen solid for a long time. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." "Then we run together. But you stay behind me, and if I go down, I stay and fight." "No, Dao. If I go down, you run. You get to safety. You tell them what happened here." I reached out and gripped her upper hand. The gesture she'd offered me days ago, the one I'd refused. "Promise me." She looked at our joined hands for a long moment. When she looked up, her secondary eyes were wet. "I will not promise that." Kreth found us 100 meters from the river. There were 4 of them, standard scouting configuration, 2 with plasma rifles, 2 with the brutal close-quarters blades they preferred for personal kills. I dropped the first one with a headshot before they knew we were there, wounded a second with a shot to the thorax, and then everything became chaos. Plasma fire lit up the night. I pushed Yireth behind a rock formation and fired until my power cell ran dry, then switched to my knife because it was either that or my teeth. A blade caught my thigh, and I felt the cold burn of Kreth poison working into my bloodstream. Not lethal to humans, but disorienting, numbing. The 3rd Kreth died on my knife, but the 4th had me pinned, its blade rising for the kill when 60 kilograms of Velorii Diplomat hit it from behind. Yireth had never been in combat, that much was obvious from her form, from the way she attacked with more desperation than skill. But she had 4 arms, each one wrapped around a different part of the Kreth's anatomy, and she was holding on with the kind of grip that only comes from absolute terror. Kreth threw her off, but the distraction was enough. I put my knife through its eye and watched it fall. Yireth, Yireth. She was lying against a tree, all 4 arms wrapped around her midsection, silver blood leaking between her fingers. The Kreth blade had caught her when it threw her, a deep slash across her torso. "Cole." Her voice was thin, breathy. I did not. "Run, ducked." I noticed. I was already at her side, pulling out the medkit, applying pressure that made her gasp with pain. "What the hell were you thinking? That I would not let you die alone? Who said anything about dying?" I worked fast, sealing the wound with surgical glue that was meant for human tissue but would have to do. The briefing materials must have mentioned that humans are too stubborn to die. She made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been wet with blood. I am beginning to think. The briefing materials were entirely inadequate. Damn right they were. I carried her the rest of the way to the river, her slight weight barely registering against my exhaustion. She drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling in Velorian, her forearms occasionally tightening around my neck like a child clinging to a parent. When dawn came, I found a cave behind a waterfall and made camp. The Kreth extraction team would find their scouts' bodies, would know we were alive. We had maybe 12 hours before they caught up. 12 hours was a lot if you were too stubborn to quit. You need to sleep. I'm fine, Cole. Yireth's voice was stronger now, after 12 hours of rest and the surprisingly effective Velorii healing trance she'd entered while I stood guard. You have been awake for 43 hours. The poison in your system requires metabolic processing. You need to sleep. When we're safe. We may never be safe again. Will you simply never sleep? I didn't answer, because she had a point. The cave was defensible. The waterfall masked our heat signatures, and I'd rigged enough early warning systems at the approaches to wake the dead. If there was ever a time to rest, this was it. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Harrington bleeding out in the trenches of Hesperus IV, asking me to tell his daughter he loved her. Zhao holding the door while the rest of us evacuated, knowing she wouldn't make it out. Tiny, lying broken in the wreckage of their ambushed convoy, still cracking jokes while the light left his eyes. I saw Yireth, too. Silver blood on purple leaves. 4 arms wrapped around a Kreth's throat, holding on even when she knew she couldn't win. The weight of her in my arms as I carried her through the dark. I have been thinking, Yireth said, watching me with all 4 eyes, about the concept of human bonds. Dangerous territory. The academic literature suggests that human pair bonding is primarily reproductive, with secondary socially functions for resource acquisition and child rearing. She paused. This seems incomplete. You think you formed no reproductive bond with your fallen squad mates. No social advantage was gained from their loss. Yet you still speak their names in your sleep. You still carry them with you. I stared at the waterfall, at the rainbow light refracting through the spray. What's your point, Yireth? My point is that the Velorii have a concept. Shayethna. It translates poorly, but the closest approximation might be those who share breath. He refers to bonds that form not through blood or duty, but through shared experience. Through surviving together. She moved closer, settling beside me at the cave mouth. Her wound was healing fast. Velorii biology was remarkable, but she still moved carefully. When a Velorii shares Yang Shayethna with another being, they become responsible for each other. Not in the sense of ownership or obligation, but in the sense of recognition. Of saying your existence matters to me. Your survival is my concern. That sounds like friendship. It is more than friendship. It is less than love, in the romantic sense. It is, she struggled for the words. It is looking at someone and knowing that the universe would be diminished by their absence. I thought about that for a long moment. We have a word for that too. What is it? Family. Yireth was quiet. Then, very gently, she leaned against my shoulder, the first deliberate physical contact she'd initiated since the crash. I think I understand now, she said softly, why the Velorii medical ship saved you. Why they wasted resources on an enemy combatant. She turned to look at me, all 4 eyes luminous in the dim light. It was not strategy. It was not diplomacy. It was Shayethna. They looked at you broken and dying, and they recognized someone whose existence mattered. They didn't even know me. They did not need to. That is the point. She reached out with one of her smaller hands and took mine. Not the formal gesture of conditional trust, but something simpler, more instinctive. You did not need to know me either. But you carried me. You bled for me. You stayed awake for 43 hours because you were afraid of what might happen if you closed your eyes. I wanted to argue. I wanted to deflect, to fall back on professional responsibility and survival imperatives. But she was right, and we both knew it. I'm scared, I admitted, the words coming out rough and unfamiliar. Not of the Kreth, not of dying. I'm scared of... I stopped, swallowed hard. Of losing someone else. Of adding another name to the list. Then let me help you carry it. Her grip tightened on my hand. The list. The names. The weight of all those who mattered. Let me share that breath with you. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking to be family. The word hung in the air between us, strange and familiar all at once. I looked at her, this small, fierce, impossible person who had thrown herself at a Kreth warrior to save my life, and felt something shift in my chest. Something that had been locked away for a very long time. Okay, I said finally. Okay. But if we're family, you need to know something. What? Family means I get to tell you when you're being an idiot. And jumping on that Kreth? That was idiotic. She made that high-pitched whistle that meant she was offended, but her eyes were warm. You were going to die. I've been going to die for 15 years. I'm still here. Because you are too stubborn to know when to quit. That's right. I let myself smile, just a little. Now get some sleep. I'll take first watch. Cole, sleep, Yireth. I'll wake you in 4 hours. Then we move. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded and settled back against the cave wall. But she didn't release my hand and I didn't pull away. 3 hours later, the rescue beacon I had rigged from shuttle parts finally reached a coalition patrol. 6 hours after that we were on a medical frigate, being treated for injuries that should have killed us both. The debriefing took 2 days. The Velorii consortium formally protested the attack on their diplomatic personnel. The Kreth collective denied involvement, which no one believed. The peace conference was rescheduled, and new security protocols were implemented, and somewhere in the bureaucratic chaos, 2 survivors of a crash landing became a footnote in a larger political narrative. But here's the thing about footnotes. They're still part of the story. On the day I was discharged from the medical bay, Yireth met me at the door. She was wearing her diplomatic robes again, looking every inch the consortium counselor she was trained to be. But her eyes, all 4 of them, were soft in a way that had nothing to do with politics. The briefing materials have been revised, she said. I supervised the changes personally, yeah? What do they say now? That humans form deep, lasting bonds based on shared experience and mutual recognition of worth. She paused, a hint of that silver-blue blush crossing her cheeks. That they are stubborn, loyal, and surprisingly willing to die for those they consider family. Surprisingly, it is still being edited. I laughed. A real laugh. The first one in longer than I could remember. And pulled her into a hug. She stiffened for just a moment, then relaxed, all 4 arms wrapping around me in a grip that felt like coming home. So what now? I asked. Back to diplomatic functions? State dinners and treaty negotiations? Actually, I have been assigned to the peace conference security detail. As a Velorii liaison. Wait. I pulled back to look at her. You requested this. I may have suggested that my unique experience with human tactical personnel made me an ideal candidate for interspecies cooperation. You requested this so we could work together. I requested this because I have learned. She met my eyes and there was nothing diplomatic in her gaze. That humans need less sleep, but they should not have to keep watch alone. I thought about all the nights ahead, the nightmares, the memories, the weight of names that would never go away. I thought about carrying that weight by myself, the way I had for years. Then I thought about sharing it. Partners then, I said. Kayathnai, she corrected. Family. She smiled. A human expression she'd learned somewhere in our days on that unnamed world, and took my hand. Family.